So Andrew, when later on for questions, I just unmute people that have a question, basically.
Yeah, you should be able to mute and unmute people.
Right. Okay.
Cool.
All right. Cool.
All right, we're live.
We're live. Okay. All right. How you doing? This is Dave Scott, and today I'm going to be doing a master class on scales and chromaticism through in collaboration with the Jazz Workshop. Uh, we've been doing these weekly master classes every Saturday, so keep an eye out. Mark Momus did an excellent uh, class this morning on rhythm and rhythmic complexity, etc., ways to practice rhythms. Um, Last week, Dave Ambrosio did one on memorizing tunes, etc. And there's some good ones coming up. Sebastian Noel has one, I believe, next week, and the following week, Michelle Walker will be doing one. So keep an eye out for this. And also, please visit the website for a list of all our classes and private lessons. We have a lot of instructors and different classes for different levels. Anyway, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to first just do a little demonstration on ways to use scales, and then get into a little bit of how to use chromaticism as it applies to chord structures, harmony, etc. And then I'll open it up for questions, maybe towards the end. Okay. So anyway, first of all, I'm going to screen share here. Get that out of the way. Get that out of the way. Sorry. Okay. So the first little thing here is I have major scales and its modes. So if you first of all, the most important thing is to learn all your major scales, and then from there the minor scales. But learning your major scales and learning the modes of the major scale would be a good place to start. Okay, so the thing is, if you learn all your major scales and you work some of these exercises I show you on the major scales, then it's very easy to apply that to the modes. Because as you know, the modes are built on different degrees of the major scale. So it's all basically the same notes. It's the same key signature, just different starting points. And the modes have different qualities, right? The major scale is a major scale. It's got a major quality. The Dorian mode has a minor quality. So major scale. Can you hear that? Then we go to Dorian. It's got a minor quality. Phrygian has a minor quality. Phrygian is the third mode, starting on the third degree of the scale. Fourth mode is Lydian. Mixolydian? Major quality. Both Lydian and Mixolydian have a major quality and are alterations of the major scale. Aeolian, which is our natural minor, minor quality. And then Locrian has a diminished quality, but it actually has a minor seventh in there, so it's actually a half diminished. Okay, and these are the diatonic chords of the major scale. So ways to practice. So first, I'm just going to take the concert B flat major scale, and I'm going to show you some exercises that you can do. And actually, there's a great video if you can find it. And this is where I learned this. And it was a John Schofield video, and it was originally called On Improvisation. You used to be able to YouTube it, but you can't get it there anymore. They're just little chunks of it. But he actually goes through the whole process of how to practice scales and how to apply scales. And he goes through all the modes of the major scale, the melodic minor modes, etc., which I'm going to do a little bit of today. If you can find that video, it's really great. It's a couple hours long, and it's pretty involved, but it's really covers a lot of territory. So, and Schofield's great, a great improviser. So, anyway, but these are some of the things that I learned from that video, and then talking to people about it through the years, etc. And I think it's pretty well documented that Coltrane used to practice these kinds of things when he would work on scales for hours at a time. So first I'm just going to take, like I said, the concert B-flat major scale. So you play the scale, right, up and down a little bit through the range of the instrument. All right, and then you do a pattern of diatonic thirds. Thirds, fourths, fifths, sixths, sevenths, right? All through the scale. The important thing here is it's not just learning the scale and being able to execute the scales on your instrument, which is obviously very important, but it's getting to the point where you're hearing the tonality, right? You're hearing the tonality of all the different scales, all the different qualities, because when you apply these to the music and you apply these to harmonic structures, it's very important to be able to hear those tonalities. And using the scale, if you know the scale well and you hear the scale, then you're obviously hearing the entire tonality. Okay, so anyway, so the next pattern would be a pattern of thirds. Right? Then the next would be a pattern of fourths. Then fifths. Sixths. Then sevenths. All diatonic. All the notes fall within the scale. Right? Okay, so then once you've done that, and then obviously you can spend a lot of time with this. The beauty of it, it's limitless. You know, this is one of the things about improvisation that's really great, is it's limitless. The things you can work on just within one scale, right? Okay, so then once you've done that, then you want to do the diatonic triads. Okay, then you want to do the inversions of those triads. And keep the same inversion every time. So I'm going to start with the first inversion. So all the triads that I play are all going to be first inversion, diatonic. Right? Got to think about it a little bit. Then second inversion. Okay. So then you've covered all the triads. And then obviously, like I said, it takes time. You can spend some time with it. You can spend years doing this, you know, if you want to work all the scales. And like I said before, the beauty of it though is once you've done this on the majors, it all applies to all the modes of the major, right? So once you've done these exercises, if you're going to go and you're going to start working on Dorian modes, then you can do the same exercises. It's going to basically the same notes. Just you want to hear the tonality a little bit different. Okay. All right. So then after you've done that, then you go to seventh chords. Then inversions. So then we're going to do first inversion of the seventh chords. Let's see. Second inversion. Then third inversion. Still got to think about it. And there was a time I spent years ago where I did this on all of the majors and all the modes and then all the melodic minors. So again, if you were to do this on all major scales and all keys, melodic minors and all keys, that would be a great accomplishment in itself. And then you just apply it to the different degrees of those scales and those modes, right? And these modes we use them all the time. Different chord quality. I have a sheet I'll show you later where I just put together the ones I use the most, and you can find this in many books. Dan Hurley has a great book called The Jazz Language, where at the end of I believe that's the one, Jazz Language, and he has a whole list of what kind of scales apply to what kind of chord qualities. Okay, and I put together a list of the ones that I use the most, and most of them are modes of the major scale and modes of the melodic minor. Almost exclusively. There are a few others. Okay, so I don't know. Did we have any questions so far? No. Okay. So then you want to spend some time improvising on that scale, right? So some people like to, and I do too sometimes, it depends on the chord, you know, especially when I get into more complex chords. I'll actually make a short little recording on GarageBand. I'll show you that later when we get into some other things. So that I can actually hear the chord and hear the quality that I'm playing with. And you don't always have that available to you, so if you're just somewhere in a practice room, you can still practice without it. But I think that's a good tool to use now with the technology we have to help you hear the tonality better. So here's our, oh, excuse me, I didn't transpose. There's our B flat concert major chord, right? Major 7. So then I'm going to improvise just using scale tones. No chromatics yet. You want to get the scale, and I think it's important to spend some time just learning scale, just to improvise only using scale tones. Then later you can add the chromaticism. So spend some time doing that. And if you can hear, I'm using a lot of those intervals and some of the triads, and even some of the seventh chords when I'm improvising. You want to get to the point where that's kind of automatic. You know, you start hearing lines and contours like that through practice. But it's okay when you first begin practicing to try to on purpose, insert some of those. Especially the triads. I mean, if you take a major scale, if you want to think major triads, well, the 1, the 4, and the 5 are major. So in the key of B flat, you've got a B flat major triad, an E flat major triad, and an F major triad. So everybody follow? Okay, so, and then you, let's just go through the modes quickly, right? We have the Ionian, which I've been working on. So then I can do the same thing with the Dorian. Okay, so I may want to do the exercises, or at least some of the exercises, just to get the scale in my ear. So now we've got a different quality. The first one was major, right? Dorian is, outside of the major scale, maybe the most commonly used mode, right? Because then, you know, the old So What, the Miles Davis, that was based on the Dorian mode, the Dorian scale. And whenever we, probably 95 to 97% of the time when we see a minor 7 chord, we're going to use the Dorian mode, right? So, Dorian. And I used to, I mean, as a trumpet player, and I know trombone players too, if you ever practiced the Arbin scales, which I learned as a kid, you're practicing the modes when you practice those scale exercises. Etc. So even if you're not a trumpet player or a trombone player, it might be something that you can invest in as an Arbin's book, where you can, all the scale exercises are like that, and they go through the mode, and they're pretty extensive, all the major scale exercises. So later on, when I got to college and I started learning about theory and harmony, I realized that I'd been practicing the modes for years, the modes of the major scale. So I already knew the modes, and it was easy to learn to apply those modes. And I began hearing those modes too. Through practice, I started to hear those modes. I started to hear the qualities of the modes. Very important. It's really, hearing it is really the key. To be able to use the modes and the scales, you have to be able to hear them. You have to have the sound, the tonality in your ear, right? It's not just about knowing what notes. It's a combination of both. But through practice, you want to get better at hearing those. All right? Okay, so anyway, I'll just a little bit Dorian, right? same exercise as I did on the C major, same notes, just a different tonality. Then the triads. And I like to finish up on the last note, on the tonic, right? So it keeps that tonality in my brain. What? Etc. Seventh chords. So forth, right? And then I want to improvise over that tonality. I cheated in there. I added a chromatic. But anyway, practice in all. Okay, then the next most commonly used would be either mixolydian or lydian, right? Lydian is a major scale with a raised 4. So these are the major sounding modes. The 1, the Ionian, the 4, the Lydian, and the 5, the mixolydian. And the Lydian raised 4, one of my favorite sounds, really. Joe Henderson chord, Lydian. Major 7, sharp 11. Aeolian sometimes. Yeah, on the, if you guys know the old recording Milestones, the original Milestones recording back in like '58, where they played, you know, the modal, right? So the G minor sections, it's a 40-bar progression. The G minor sections are based on the Dorian mode, but then when they go to the A minor section, it's based on the Aeolian mode. Little different sound. Little different sound. There's one note difference. The Dorian has a natural 6. The Aeolian has a lowered 6. Or minor 6. Okay, so anyway, those are... I don't want to get too bogged down here, but we're going to run out of time. Modes of the major scale, and I'm just touching on them. But like I said, you can spend a lot of time with this. Okay, so let's move on now to the melodic minor modes, which I use a great deal. I use the melodic minor on many things, and it works on many things. And the modes of the melodic minor. Probably the most common is the altered scale, which works on an altered dominant, right? Which is the 7th mode of the melodic minor scale. So sometimes when I'm thinking over an altered dominant, I'll just think up a half step, right? The flat 9 or the flat 2, and work off that melodic minor scale. So for instance, if I'm playing a G7 altered, right? here's the altered scale. Well, then I can start on the flat 2 and play the A flat melodic minor. And also I can start on the sharp 11 and play the Lydian dominant, which is the 4th mode of the melodic minor scale. And you're also thinking off the tritone sub that way. Okay, so these are all, I mean, altering dominants. If you want to practice altering your dominants, knowing your melodic minor scales is really important. So, same exercises, right? So I'm going to practice play the B flat concert. Right, and to get melodic minor, we take the natural minor, the Aeolian, which is a minor third lower than the major, or the 6th note of the major scale, 6th mode of the major scale, and we raise the 6th and 7th degrees of that. Here's our natural minor. To melodic minor, right? I love the melodic minor. So, same thing. Practice your patterns of thirds, fourths, fifths, sixths, sevenths, your diatonic triads, inversions of those diatonic triads, and then the 7th chords, diatonic 7th chords, and versions of the diatonic 7th chords. If you can do all that on all your major scales and all your melodic minor scales, you're well on your way. You have a wealth of knowledge right there, and under your fingers and in your ear. Number 1 is hear it. Hear the tonality. Right? And it also can help you get better at hearing chord qualities. Especially if, like I said, if you set up a little play along where you're playing the different chord qualities and then you're practicing the scales over those chord qualities, it's really helps get those tonalities in your ear. Okay? I mean, in New York, I play a lot with a lot of different musicians. We have little workshops all the time, basically, where people bring in original music. And a lot of times the harmonic structures are very complex, right? And difficult to hear at first. But through the years, I've gotten better at identifying chord qualities, sus chords, whatever, altered dominants, minor 7 flat 5s, Lydian, whatever, major 7 sharp 11. And then a lot of times they use different notes in the bass. But generally those notes in the bass are notes that are in the chord. Not always, but generally. So if you can learn to distinguish the chord qualities, and then when you're first following a new piece of music, it's easy to get lost. But the way you find your way back is to follow, and then you start to recognize some of the chord qualities and some of the patterns, some of the harmonic patterns, and then it becomes easier to negotiate those chord qualities, right? So, and then going back to playing standards and even just the blues, right? Just knowing these structures and these scales can give you a lot of different ways to use vocabulary, right? And to me, and one of the beauty of really working with scales too is, we all want to learn vocabulary through listening, obviously. When I was a kid, I listened like crazy. But through listening, we learn vocabulary, and then through transcribing also, which is a very high form of ear training, right? Transcribing solos, transcribing chord changes. Being able to, for instance, if you hear a recording of a particular tune that you like, maybe they're doing something with the changes that that you like better than the ones you use, you know, so you take those off, you transcribe those. Anyway, so anyway, I lost my train of thought there. Okay, so let's talk about the melodic minor scales a little bit. So we've got the there's the B flat melodic minor, and then the second mode is the Dorian with a flat 2. Minor quality. Third mode omitted. Whoops. Major quality, then lydian dominant. All right, then mix a lydian flat 6. Whoops, I went the wrong way. Then the Locrian raise 2. And then the altered scale. And a melodic minor, when I'm working off minor 2-5-1s, I use the melodic minor for the 1 chord. Because generally in a minor 2-5-1, the 1 chord is a minor 6, not a minor 7. And of course it has the natural 6th. Okay, so anyway, same thing with the melodic minors. Just get really good at playing through the melodic minors. Like I said, if you can do the melodic minor itself, it's really makes it much easier to work on these, the modes of melodic minor, because you really already know them. They're just from a different starting point and a different tonality, a little different tonality. Okay. So I'm going to take the okay. So then I can take the Dorian flat 2. Then the Lydian augmented. Etc., etc. Okay, so I'm going to move on because we're going to run out of time. And these are 2 scales that I use frequently that are not modes of the major or the melodic minor. And one is the harmonic major, which is just a major, well, there's 2 ways. It's a major scale with a flat 6, or it's a harmonic minor with a major 3rd, right? It's the same thing. forth. Okay, and then the other one is the Phrygian dominant, which works great on a 5 chord in a minor when you're working on a 2-5-1 minor. The Phrygian dominant has a and one of the reasons it works is because it's the 5th mode of the harmonic minor scale. Right? So if you were going to play F Phrygian dominant, that would be the 5th. So here's your B flat harmonic minor scale. So then you start on the 5. It's also a mixed Lydian mode with a lowered 2 and a lowered 6. So when you're working on the dominant chord, you got a flat 9 and a flat 13. Whoops. Right, and I like to think of it as flat 13 because you have the natural 5 in there. So whenever I spent years ago, I spent some time working on 2-5-1 minors, and that I would generally think off the Phrygian dominant on the 5 chord in a minor key. The 2 chord I would use Locrian, or the Locrian raised 2 also works. They're very similar. Locrian raised 2 works great on a minor 7 flat 5, as does Locrian. Okay, the raised 2 would be a natural 9, right? The flat 9 here, the lowered 2 here really doesn't fit as well as the raised 2, although it's a good passing tone. So either one of those work. So then I'd use the on a 2 chord in a minor key. Then I would use the Phrygian dominant on the 5, and then the melodic minor on the 1. All starting on the roots, right? The chords. So I would say I'm in a key of B flat minor. So then I would use C Locrian or C Locrian raised 2 for the 2 chord. Then F Phrygian dominant for the 5 chord. And then B flat melodic minor for the 1 chord. A little bit different. Minor is a little bit different animal. I urge people to work on 2-5-1s in minor keys. Sometimes I feel like that gets neglected, and it's really important. When I was younger, I spent years working on major 2-5-1s and the scales and so forth. And then I spent some time working on the minors. And when I got the minors down, I made a huge difference. Because you see a lot more 2-5-1 minors than we think. You know, I mean, Autumn Leaves is 2-5-1 in major, and then it's a 2-5-1 in the relative minor, right? Okay, so those are 2 scales that I still will use that aren't modes of the major and melodic minor. Okay, so now I'm going to move on now to applying chromaticism. Okay, so chromaticism is a tricky animal, right? And, you know, I've had students where I've said, okay, I want to get them working on some chromaticism. And it still has to be used as a tool to create lines, and still when you're using it over harmonic structures. If you're playing free, well, then that's a different thing. But when you're using chromaticism over harmonic structures, then it's tricky. So a good way to start is to take any mode that you know well, right? Can be the major scale, can be one of the modes. It doesn't matter. It could be the melodic minor. But you want to, so after you go through the process of doing your practice over, the thirds, fourths, fifths, etc., the intervals, and then the diatonic chords and inversions, then improvise using scale tones only, then improvise using chromaticism. Okay, but when you first start to use it, and like I said, I've had students, I'll say, okay, try to apply. Well, you can't just jump in and start forcing it. It has to make music, has to be melodic. So generally speaking, the chromatic tones, they're passing tones, right? So they're going to fall on upbeats. So when you first begin to practice, right? So I'm starting on the downbeat. I'm playing eighth notes. I'm going to use the B flat melodic minor. Okay, so when I start to apply chromatics, probably 90%, 95% of the time, I'm going to use those chromatics, as I said, as passing tones, and they're going to fall on the upbeats. And the scale tones, the strong harmonic tones, are going to fall on the downbeats. Right? So a good way to start to practice this is just take the scale and say, okay, I'm going to practice just placing a chromatic tone between the first degree of the scale and the second degree of the scale, right? So first just start out by practicing okay, then start adding notes around it. Right? And when you go to the third, between 2 and 3 is a chromatic tone, and between 7 and 1 is a chromatic tone. So right there you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and chromatic tones in a row if you go between 1 and 2. And then practice making music just with those 5 notes. It's kind of hard. I mean, you have to kind of reel yourself in to practice these kinds of things. Right? Then add, you can go either direction. So if we're going up, then we're going to add another chromatic tone between 3 and 4. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 7, 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? No chromaticism. Then if we add the chromatic between 3 and 4. And actually I'm going pretty fast, but start slowly, and as I said, work on applying the chromatic tones to the upbeats, the strong chord tones and the downbeats, and be creative with it. Again, the beauty of scales is you can use the scales to create your own vocabulary. You know, that's what Coltrane did. He said he would practice, take one scale. He would practice 8 or 9 hours a day. Well, he'd spend 6 or 7 hours on just one scale, exploring all the possibilities. And you can hear, like, when he plays on tunes like So What and modal tunes like that, you can hear all the different things that he's using. You can hear some of the triads. You can hear the way he uses the triads, the chromaticism. So to me, that's the beauty of it. It's really, you can be creative. It's really a great tool to be creative. And like I said, create some of your own vocabulary. So when you add the rest of the tones, still, again, hearing the tonality of the scale is utmost importance. You need to hear the tonality of the scale. Hear the scale tones for the chromatics to work, because basically the chromatics are playing in and around passing tones, neighbor tones, whatever, around the tonality of that scale, around the chord tones of that scale. So first I'm gonna improvise just using the scale tones. Now I'm going to add chromaticism. And I'm especially going to focus on the ones I talked about between 7 and 1, 2 and 3, and 3 and 4. So it's not something that happens overnight, but I was always drawn to chromaticism. I love chromaticism and the possibilities, because really when you start adding chromaticism to the scale, it pretty much doubles the possibilities, right? So again, practice slow. Be creative with it. There's really no formula. I've had people ask me that, because I use a lot of chromaticism in my playing, and I've had people say, what are you doing? Or is there any, there's really no formula to it other than you're using a lot of passing tones, neighbor tones, etc., and making that work within the harmonic structure. Like I said, you can't force it. You can't just say, okay, I'm going to throw in some chromaticism. And going back to the original, I keep saying this over and over, but you have to know the scale really well in order to apply chromaticism. You have to know the scale and hear the scale really well. Hear the tonality. I know I keep saying that, but that's really important. So real quick, I don't know, I guess before we run out of time, I want to see if anybody has any questions. Oh, wait a minute, you're muted. Tim, you I gotta unmute you. Hold on. Let's see, Tim. I can't figure out how to unmute you, man. Can you unmute yourself, Tim? Oh, maybe I have to stop screen share. I don't know. Andrew, you there? Andrew. You're not there. Let me see.
Now, can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can. Yeah.
Okay. Could you talk about your garage band practice things?
Okay,
You
let me
know?
demonstrate.
Yeah.
I don't think we're gonna have time.
Okay.
I was gonna take one of my tunes and walk through the different chords, but I'll just do one for instance.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
so I had this tune I was gonna play for you, but I don't think we're gonna have time now. So what I do is I just take a keyboard and
Yeah.
I play the chord I want to work with into
Yeah.
GarageBand, and I just hit it a few times, so it's a minute or two's worth of.
Okay.
I just keep hitting it, and then I practice over it.
I see.
Or you can also do it on finale. You put in the chord, and then you just
Loop it.
cut and paste like 4 bars of whole notes,
Sure.
and then have it repeat 30 times.
Yeah. That sounds easy enough.
So, but let me just show you. Okay, for instance, here's one of the. And I put together these so that I could demonstrate. Okay, but so the first chord in one of the tunes I was going to play for you was where is it? Oh shoot. Well, here's one. Okay, this is easy. Can you guys hear this?
Yeah.
All right, so this is a D flat major 7 sharp 11 chord, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to use the Lydian mode, concert D flat. Right? So
Yeah.
then I played this into GarageBand, and actually I only have a 2-octave keyboard, so if you have a little bit of keyboard, you can spread it out a little bit more so it's fuller, but this is a little. But anyway, so then I'm going to practice over it, improvising. Okay, first I'm going to practice just using scale tones. Etc. Right? Then I'm going to add chromatics.
Like you could get just some kind of organ sound, so it would just be constant.
Oh yeah, I don't know. I just used the piano, but there's all kinds of different.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you want to use an electric piano, whatever.
Sure.
One of the things I wanted to mention too, when you're working on chromaticism with your lines, yeah, you want to create contours where you're going up, down, different intervals, but it's also cool to learn how to use them going in one direction for a while and then coming back down. So try to form lines. Let me get that up again. I'll show you. Try to form lines going both directions without going back in the other direction. So let me show you. Right? It's hard to do it without coming back in the other direction or using another note in between. It's endless, really.
Hmm.
I mean, Kenny Dorham was a master of that. Lines, you know, lines that would long lines go in one direction. Beautiful, ascending and descending. Beauty would create these beautiful lines, and you can hear all the scale. You know, the tones. It's just he was beautiful at using the chromaticism to create those lines. So, I think we're almost out of time. Would anybody else have a question? You got a question, John?
Could you just elaborate a little more on how you add the chromatic to the scale tones? Like, I naturally hear it sort of going up to it.
Oh yeah.
But,
Or
but
what do they know? Yeah, I don't know. There's a term for that, encapsulate or something like that, or encapsulate. Anyway, uh, yeah, it can be anything. You know, just what you just did is a good example of it. Is that what you're saying?
But do you have a good like practice pattern to where we can go from?
No, see now that's I don't really have a specific set of rules, or I mean, people have asked me about that. Maybe I should try to come up with one, but there's really no specific set of rules other than again the scale tones on the downbeats. For starters. I mean, I think I just played a line where I started on a non-scale tone, but in general, scale tones on the downbeats, and practice that way first. Try, John. Just play me a C. Play me a D Dorian, right?
Mean a scale?
Yeah, just play it real quick. Okay, now go up the scale and throw in some chromaticism between the scale tones on the downbeats. Excuse me, on the upbeats. That's it. That's it. Now come back down. Yeah, there was one in there you put on a downbeat, but that's the idea. That's
Well,
the idea.
that was a bad case of professoritis.
No, but that's the idea. It's just not like I said. I don't have a formula. I don't know if there ever somebody maybe has come up with one. You maybe can find it. I know Bleeman has a book on chromaticism, and I haven't really looked at it, but I'm sure there's some good information in there. So, Gary, my good friend Gary Versace.
Yeah, Dave.
You got anything to add quickly?
No, that was great. There is, and I haven't investigated it thoroughly, but I have a PDF I could send you of Barry Harris has created an entire method for passing tones and scales.
Right.
And his whole thing started with just what you said, a bebop scale, adding one passing tone in one place in the scale.
Right.
But then he went way, way past that with all the ones you're doing between, you know, four in a row in the middle of the scale. And he has very specific set of rules about how you actually play those and make them come out on downbeats, like you said, all the chord tones.
Right.
But I haven't gone specifically into practicing it in that way.
That would be cool to check out. Yeah.
It's very complex, and it's very intellectual way of doing something. I think maybe Dave is getting to it in maybe a slightly simpler, more organic way.
Yeah,
you know, I think using your ear and the tonalities like you laid out, Dave, with the modes is really a very natural way. But for the geeky at heart, you could search Barry Harris online and find there's pages and pages of scales listed that basically end up having everything that Dave played, with the notes written out in the appropriate place, and there's an explanation for it. Like I said, I've more done what Dave has done. I haven't gone specifically into that. And John, only one more thing, John, what you said about Dave, I think the term you were looking for was enclosures, maybe?
Yeah,
Yes.
something. Yeah.
So John, you can also search in jazz theory books or online enclosures, and that little thing you had, adding chromaticism around a note, people have also come up with formulas for that. So start a half step below, go a whole step above, chromatic note, and circle to the chord tone. Ba ba da ba da, ba ba da ba da, ba ba da ba da, ba ba da ba da. You can go through every chord tone of a chord and add those enclosures, and you're actually adding chromaticism by doing that. Again, another thing I haven't done specifically and defined theoretically, but you can if you want to get into exactly how to do that. So, but I love what Dave Dave is doing it in a very organic way, and it gets you to hear the tonalities. I agree with everything you said, Dave. It's
Hey,
great.
man, thanks for your input. I appreciate it. So, you guys, real quick before we go, here's just, I mean, this is just something I came up with quickly. Like I said, there's books with all this and more. These are the ones that I use the most, and I don't know if there's a way to transfer it to you guys. I suppose if anybody wants a copy of it,
Just take a picture.
well, you can do that. It's yeah, there it is. That's the whole thing. If you want to do that, or you can email me at davescottmusic at Gmail. davescottmusic at Gmail, all one word, and I'll be happy to send you a PDF of this.
Yeah, just take a picture and then copy it.
What's that?
Take a picture of it and then copy it, and then you've got a PDF.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I've got this is a PDF here. I could email this to anybody that wants it.
Right.
If they want to keep it and print it out. So if anybody wants this, let me know. But it just goes a major scale, right? What it works on: Dorian mode, Phrygian, sus flat 9, major 7 sharp 11 with 7th in the bass. Example, right?
Yeah.
Lydian, etc. Mixolydian, Aeolian low, and then the melodic minor, altered, Lydian dominant. I don't use all the most of the minors, the melodic minor, but the most commonly used, right? Phrygian dominant, right? I said works particularly well in a 5 and a minor key. Diminished whole half, right? We didn't actually talk about diminished scales, but it's really important to know your diminished scales too. And then harmonic major.
Hey, Dave.
Yeah.
I had one other question actually, and how you teach. One thing that I always found challenging was once you had this template for the scales, right?
Right.
And they're laid out, then you have all the notes. It's like a grid, right? And you can hear the whole tonality. You know what to choose from. Maybe you addressed this when you were talking about the putting them in 7th chords and using intervals and triads. But the hardest thing I've found is how to describe how to make a melody out of that.
Well,
Once you have just a scale sitting there, now you know that and you hear the chord. So would you suggest in your playing, have you used like arpeggios of chords and the intervals you were talking about to help create those melodies? Or how do you get to that next step?
well, sometimes I like to think of I'll use some of the most definitely the thirds, the fourths, right, especially thirds and fourths. Trumpet players, it's harder, less natural for us to play larger intervals than like saxophone players and piano players and so forth. But and then I try to think of the triads, and like for instance, B flat or so say I'm going to say C Dorian, right? Well, the 3, the 4, and the 7 and the 6. Oh, excuse me. 3, 4, and 5 are major triads, right? So those are ways, if you want to think of the major triads in particular, I think sound good, especially when you're playing a minor key on it. If you think off the major, and then inversions of those. Right?
So in other words, you take the template of the scale and then you apply things from within the scale that are structures that will help it sound melodic, like triads.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's the whole key to me is making melodies with it.
Yeah, yeah.
Being
Dave?
more, yeah.
What about pentatonics? I mean, that's a great way to make melodies.
Well, yeah, and I didn't really touch on pentatonics, but pentatonics are great. Another thing, you know. So you can practice the right?
They sound so melodic, you know.
Right? Practice the different points of the pentatonic, practicing the scale up and down. Those are good. Yeah, I mean pentatonics though are just shorter versions of the
right
of the entire mode.
But a lot of melodies are pentatonic.
Yes, a lot of yeah. Right.
Or triads, like you said, Dave. Right?
Exactly.
Triads.
Exactly, the triads. So I mean, it's endless. That's the beauty of scales. You know, it's endless. And you know, like I said, I play stuff. People bring in original music. I say, "Whoa, I've never seen that one. What is that? What scale are you thinking of there?" Well, A harmonic major, or you know what I mean. I said, "Oh, okay, I see how that works." And I've asked my tunes. I've asked other people. I say, "Man, I can't find something that works on this chord," and somebody will say, "Yeah, try this." And I say, "Oh, okay, good." You know, we discuss these things. You know. Right, dear?
Yeah, man, always. And it's endless because then you, like like I'm sure you do, you start applying them over other bass notes.
Yes.
Or once you know all those scales, then you put a different note in the bass and the same, or change the key but play the same scale, and now the whole scale sounds completely fresh and dissonant and new, right? But you didn't learn anything; you just put it in a different context.
Yeah, you're just putting it, you know. Exactly. And then, you know, I've discussed scales with certain people, like this good friend of mine, Adam Coker, is a great tenor sax player. And we were playing a tune that somebody brought in that had all these funny chords, right? And so we were talking about what scales to use. But Adam, see, I like to think sometimes different. Like, for instance, if I'm playing a minor 7 chord, I might want to think off the third and think off the Lydian, right? Same notes, or like I said, on a dominant, altered dominant, I like to think off the flat 9, right, and use the melodic minor. But Adam always wants to think off of the root or the bass note. So we'd say, oh, I'd use this one, and he'd say, well, no, but I want to use this because that's the root or it's the bass note, right? The bass note might be a slash chord with a different note in the bass, but like I said, generally that note is most times, not always, is in the chord, is a part of the chord. Like it might be a major 7 with a 7th in the bass, or the 3rd in the bass, or whatever. So everybody's different, you know, like how you approach it. I know when I think different scales, I'll come up with different vocabulary. For instance, if I think off a G altered or an A flat melodic minor, the same notes, but I might come up with different vocabulary. At least that's the way my brain works, you know. So I might come up with different vocabulary thinking off the G altered than I will the A flat melodic minor or the D flat Lydian dominant. They're all the same notes, just different starting point, and they have a different twist to them tonally, you know. Cool.
Yeah.
I think we're over.
Cool, man. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you guys for attending. And then next week, I think it's be sure and check it out. I think Sebastian Noel. I'm not sure what his topic is, but you know, so I'm glad we can do these little master classes and interact and
It's great.
get the information out. You know, hopefully it's useful. So
Definitely.
All right. Nice seeing you, Dave.
yeah, John. Good, Tim. Good to see you.
Okay,
Good.
you
All
too,
right.
man.
Yes, thank you. I will try to open it up using these various procedures.
All right. Everybody stay safe.
Hey,
Yeah,
Teddy.
Dave.
All right, you too.
Hey, how's it going?
Yeah.
Thanks, Dave.